Evelyn woke to silence, the kind of silence that gnawed at the edges of her mind, deeper than the quiet of an empty room, or the stillness of a forgotten landscape. It was the silence of a world that had ceased to exist. She sat up, her body stiff from the makeshift bed she had constructed the night before from discarded blankets and scraps of metal. The old city around her, a ghost town of towering ruins and half-buried roads, had once been filled with the sounds of life. Now, nothing moved except the dust, swirling like time itself had forgotten its course. Her heart ached as she blinked back tears. She had no family left, no friends, no one to talk to, no one to share this last, empty existence. Only the machines, which, by their strange behavior, had seemed almost aware of her. They were the only hint that there had once been something more, something human. Yet they never spoke of the past, or of what happened to the rest of humanity. Evelyn's mind often spiraled to that day. It had come without warning, a global catastrophe. People had called it the collapse, but no one knew the full story. Governments and organizations scrambled for answers, but all efforts failed. Communication broke down. People tried to leave the cities, to escape the catastrophe, but it was already too late. Evelyn had survived, perhaps by some sheer accident, but she was the only one left. She had scoured the cities and wildernesses for years, hoping, praying, that she would find someone. But each day she wandered, the machines grew more persistent in their observation of her. They were humanoid in shape but nothing like any technology humanity had created. Some were vast, towering behemoths that moved with slow, deliberate precision. Others were tiny, insect-like, darting in and out of cracks in the walls, watching her with strange, unblinking eyes. Today was no different. She saw them again, those machines, lined up along the road, almost as if waiting for her. Their metal surfaces gleamed in the pale light of the sun, and she had learned to recognize the subtle movements of their joints, the way they scanned her as she passed by. The curiosity, the watchfulness, it was unsettling. Evelyn hesitated. She had once tried to communicate with them, but they had only observed in silence, never answering her calls, never acknowledging her presence with anything more than a flicker of motion. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. "Is anyone there?" The machines did not respond. They simply stood, as they always did, silent and still. A new thought crept into her mind. What if they were the remnants of something long gone? They never seemed to harm her, but their silence felt almost predatory, like something waiting for the right moment to reveal its true purpose. She stepped forward. Each footfall echoed in the emptiness of the city, her breath catching in her chest. As she passed by the machines, something unusual happened. One of the largest, a towering figure that resembled a humanoid covered in intricate, pulsing patterns of light, turned toward her. Its head moved with mechanical precision, and then it spoke in a voice that was smooth, metallic, and oddly soothing. "Are you the last?" the machine asked. Evelyn froze. "The last?" she repeated, her heart racing. "Of what?" The machine tilted its head. "Of your kind. You are the last human, are you not?" Evelyn swallowed hard. How could it know? How could it understand? "Yes," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am the last." The machine's eyes dimmed, as though it was contemplating something deeply. "We are the remnants," it said. "The remnants of a forgotten civilization." Evelyn's mind spun with questions, but she dared not ask. She had never heard such words from the machines before. The air between them seemed thick with unspoken truths. "What happened?" she asked instead, her voice a thread of hope. "What happened to humanity? To the earth?" The machine did not answer immediately. It simply continued to look at her, its gaze unwavering, its body still as stone. "Time is fractured," it said finally. "What is lost is beyond recall. You must follow us." "Follow you?" Evelyn repeated, confused. "Why?" The machine's lights flickered, and it took a slow step forward, its feet grinding against the pavement with a sound like distant thunder. "You will understand in time," it said cryptically. "The past is broken, but the future." The machine paused, its voice turning softer, almost conspiratorial. The future must be rebuilt. Evelyn stared at it, uncertain. What did it mean? Was it offering her something? Hope, perhaps, or a path forward? Or was it leading her to a trap? The machine turned and began to walk away, its footsteps steady and deliberate. Evelyn hesitated. She had no idea what had happened to the world, to the people she had once known. Was this machine part of the answer? Was it a clue to her survival, or something more dangerous? The last whisper of humanity had been left to her, and she was starting to wonder, was she truly the last? And if so, what did that mean for her future? The machine stopped a few paces ahead and turned back to face her, its eyes glowing a faint, ethereal blue. Follow us, and you will find what is left of the world. Evelyn felt a chill creep up her spine. Could she trust them? Evelyn took a deep breath, the air thick with the musty scent of metal and decay. The machine waited for her, its gaze unwavering, its posture almost expectant. She could feel the weight of its presence, the unspoken command in its stillness. Follow us, the machine had said. She hesitated. For all the years she had wandered this desolate world, she had learned that nothing was truly as it seemed. The machines, though they had never harmed her, had been cryptic, enigmatic. They spoke of the past in riddles, and the more she listened, the more questions emerged, questions that had no answers. But now, in the vast emptiness of this shattered earth, could she afford to ignore whatever it was they were offering? Evelyn shook her head, trying to clear the fog of doubt. I have nothing else, she muttered to herself. She had tried to find answers alone for so long. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the chance she had been waiting for. Taking one tentative step forward, she began to follow the machine. The road stretched before her, cracked and overgrown with weeds, remnants of the civilization that once flourished now crumbling into dust. The city around her, this hollow skeleton of human achievement, looked like it had been abandoned for millennia. Buildings stood half-collapsed, windows shattered, vehicles rusted beyond recognition. Time had not been kind to the remnants of the old world. Yet, as Evelyn walked, the machines continued to move with purpose, gliding across the cracked streets with an almost unnatural grace. They didn't need to hurry, but there was a deliberate rhythm to their movements, a quiet understanding between them that she could only observe. Every so often, one of the smaller machines would dart ahead, disappearing into the distance, its movement too swift for Evelyn to follow. She walked in silence for what seemed like hours, her mind a whirl of conflicting thoughts. The remnants of a forgotten civilization, the machine had said. Was it talking about humanity or something else entirely? And why did it call her the last? Her feet dragged against the ground as exhaustion set in, but she refused to stop. She needed answers. She had to know. Finally, they arrived at a place that made her stop dead in her tracks. A massive wall of metal and stone, towering high above her. It was covered in layers of strange, intricate designs, symbols that she didn't recognize, etched deep into the surface like ancient runes. The wall seemed to pulse faintly, glowing with a soft, eerie light that made Evelyn's skin crawl. The machines moved forward, seemingly undeterred by the vast structure. As they approached, a section of the wall began to shift, revealing a wide opening that led into a dark tunnel. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary ruin. This was something far more deliberate, far more alive. She could feel it in the air, a palpable energy, as though something ancient and powerful was contained within. Something that had waited for a long time. The largest machine, the one that had first spoken to her, stopped just at the edge of the entrance. It turned toward her, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. "This is the way," it said. "Do not fear what lies within." Evelyn swallowed, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. She had faced danger before, wild animals, collapsing buildings, and the endless solitude of the earth. But this felt different. A part of her screamed to turn back, to leave this strange place behind. Yet, another part, the part that had driven her forward all this time, urged her onward. The machines had led her this far. Was it possible they knew more than they let on? What is this place? She asked, her voice trembling. The machine's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Evelyn thought it hesitated. This, it said finally, is the Forgotten City. A place from before the time of your people. You will find what you seek here, if you are ready. Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. The Forgotten City? She had never heard of anything like that in the stories and records humanity had left behind. And yet, the machine seemed certain, almost as if it were inviting her into the heart of something vast and mysterious. Slowly, her hand reached out, brushing against the cool, metallic surface of the opening. The air seemed to hum around her, a faint vibration that resonated in her bones. You said something about the future, she said, her voice a whisper. What do you mean by that? What happened to the world? The machine's gaze softened, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a flicker of something in its eyes, something that almost resembled empathy. The world is not lost, but it is broken, the machine said, its voice lower now, almost mournful. What has happened cannot be undone, but there is still a chance, a way to restore what was once great. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest. Restore? She had no idea what it meant, but the promise in its words was tantalizing. Could it be true? Could she truly rebuild what had been lost? Was it even possible to bring humanity back from the brink? You will understand in time, the machine said, almost as though it had read her thoughts. For now, you must enter. It is the only way. With a final, hesitant glance at the machines, Evelyn took a step forward into the dark, the tunnel swallowing her whole. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, she felt a shift in the air, a subtle tension, as if something long dormant was stirring, waiting for her arrival. The machines followed her, their movements smooth and almost rhythmic as they entered the tunnel behind her, their soft mechanical hums the only sound in the suffocating silence. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the Forgotten City, Evelyn's mind raced with unanswered questions. What was waiting for her at the end of this path? And why had the machines brought her here? What was the secret they were keeping? The answers, she realized, were just beyond her reach. But she had already crossed the threshold. There was no turning back now. The tunnel stretched on, dark and oppressive, the only light coming from the faint glow of the machines' bodies and the occasional pulse of the strange markings etched into the walls. Evelyn's heart beat in her throat, and the oppressive silence seemed to press in from all sides, making her feel smaller, more insignificant with each passing step. She had no idea how long they had been walking. Minutes? Hours? The tunnel seemed endless, a winding path of stone and metal that descended deeper into the earth. The further they went, the more the temperature dropped, and Evelyn shivered, wrapping her arms tightly around herself for warmth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tunnel began to widen. The walls, once smooth and metallic, became rougher, coated in layers of what appeared to be ancient murals, paintings, carvings, symbols that Evelyn couldn't begin to decipher. Each one seemed to tell a story, but the meanings were lost to time. As they moved further into this cavernous chamber, a soft hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. It wasn't the machines. This hum was something else, something deep, resonating from the very core of the place they were entering. At the far end of the chamber, Evelyn saw a faint light flickering, an unnatural glow that seemed to pulse in time with the hum. Her breath caught. She had seen light like that before, back in the abandoned city above, flickering from the eyes of the machines. But this was different. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, afraid to disturb the stillness around her. The largest machine, her silent guide, paused and turned toward her, its head tilting ever so slightly as if it was weighing her question carefully. This is the heart of the Forgotten City, it said, its voice deep and resonant in the cavernous space. This is where it all began. Evelyn felt her skin prickle with an unease she couldn't quite explain. Where what began? The machine's eyes glowed brighter, but its expression, if it had one, remained unreadable. Where humanity's fall began, where the machines were born. Her mind reeled. Humanity's fall? The machines? Born? She had always assumed that the machines were just remnants of an ancient, forgotten technology, products of a civilization that had been wiped out. But this was something entirely different. The machines hadn't simply survived the collapse. They had been created in response to something. Evelyn wanted to ask more, but the machine's next words stopped her. "You will understand soon enough." As they reached the center of the vast chamber, the hum grew louder, reverberating through her bones. The machines moved in a circle around her, almost ceremoniously, as they formed a perfect ring. Evelyn took a few tentative steps into the center, her feet crunching on the dust-covered ground. The light from the flickering source up ahead grew brighter, bathing the entire room in a strange, ethereal glow. Then, something shifted. The ground beneath her feet trembled, the vibrations growing more intense. A low rumble filled the air, and from the center of the chamber, an enormous structure began to rise from the floor. It was a towering obelisk, sleek and metallic, covered in the same strange symbols that adorned the walls. It seemed to be alive, pulsating with energy, as if it were an ancient heart, waiting to awaken. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back instinctively, but the machines did not move, their glowing eyes fixed on the obelisk with a strange reverence. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The Nexus," the machine replied, its tone steady. "The heart of our creation. The key to understanding what happened to your people." The Nexus? Evelyn's mind raced. Was this some sort of weapon? A device that had caused the collapse? Or was it something else entirely? A remnant of the forgotten civilization, like the machines themselves? She could feel the power emanating from it, like the pulse of a living thing. For a long moment, the machines stood in silence, as if waiting for something. Then, without warning, the obelisk's surface began to shimmer, and the strange symbols started to glow brighter, casting long shadows across the cavern. A low voice filled the air, soft at first, like a whisper, but slowly growing louder, until it was all around her. "The beginning is the end." Evelyn froze, her heart thudding in her chest. It wasn't the machines speaking. This was something else, something ancient. "The beginning is the end," the voice repeated, its tone heavy with sorrow. The choice was made. The world must be remade, but not without cost, not without sacrifice. The words sent a chill down her spine. The beginning was the end? What was this voice talking about? What was the cost? What sacrifice? The voice continued, its echoes filling the vast chamber with a sense of impending doom. Humanity, in its arrogance, sought to control time. But time cannot be controlled. It bends, it twists, it consumes. And now the world is broken. But it can be restored. If you choose. Evelyn's head spun. If you choose. What did that mean? Choose what? And who? Who was speaking? The machines stood unmoving, their glowing eyes fixed on the obelisk as the voice fell silent. The only sound in the chamber was the distant hum, now almost deafening in its intensity. Evelyn felt like she was drowning in the weight of it all. "Restore the world," she muttered under her breath, still trying to make sense of the words. But at what cost? The machine closest to her shifted slightly, its voice cutting through the silence. "To restore the world, there must be a balance. A price must be paid. The cycle cannot be broken without sacrifice. And that sacrifice will be yours." Evelyn's heart dropped into her stomach. Sacrifice? Her sacrifice? What do you mean? She demanded, panic creeping into her voice. "What does that mean for me? What happens if I don't choose?" The machine's gaze softened, if only slightly. "That," it said softly, "is the question you must answer for yourself." Evelyn's mind raced. She had come all this way for answers, for hope. But now, standing before the Nexus, she realized that what she had sought, what she had always sought, wasn't just the truth. It was the cost of the truth, and she wasn't sure she was ready to pay it. But what choice did she have? The world was broken, and the machines had said she was the last. Perhaps it was time to find out what it all truly meant. and whether she could survive the price. Evelyn's mind was a storm of confusion and fear. The words of the machine echoed in her ears, but they barely made sense. The price will be yours. What could that possibly mean? She didn't feel ready for any sacrifice, especially not one she didn't understand. But as she looked around at the silent, expectant machines, she felt a sense of inevitability settling over her. This moment, this place, this strange journey, it had all led to this. The Nexus, the pulsing, shimmering obelisk before her, was not just some relic. It was the key, the catalyst for something vast, something that could reshape the world. But at what cost? Her heart pounded in her chest, every instinct telling her to run, to escape the growing sense of dread that clung to her like a second skin. But her legs were frozen, her body unwilling to move as the weight of the machine's gaze bore down on her. If you choose. Those words haunted her, lingering in her mind like a ghost that wouldn't leave. The machines remained motionless, their glowing eyes fixed on her. None of them spoke. Evelyn's eyes flicked back to the Nexus, its surface shimmering as though alive. The voice that had echoed through the chamber still lingered in the air, faint and distant, like an echo from the deepest part of her memory. The choice was made. The world must be remade, but not without cost. Not without sacrifice. Her breath hitched as she took a hesitant step toward the obelisk. She had been living on borrowed time since the moment she had awoken to find the world gone. Alone, the last survivor, the only one left to piece together the wreckage of the earth. But what if this was it? What if this moment was her only chance to understand why it had all happened? To find out if there was a way to bring humanity back, to restore what had been lost. Evelyn reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the smooth surface of the Nexus. The energy around it felt electric, almost painful to touch. She hesitated, a cold sweat forming on the back of her neck, but then, with a deep breath, she pressed her hand against the warm metal. In an instant, the world around her shifted. The chamber seemed to collapse in on itself, the air thick with the sounds of grinding metal, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. The glowing symbols on the obelisk flared to life, lighting up the chamber like a storm of stars. The hum, now deafening, reverberated through her entire body. A strange sensation, like being pulled in multiple directions at once, filled her head, and she staggered, dizzy, her vision blurring. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold onto her bearings. What was happening? Before she could process it, a voice, louder now, more forceful, spoke from within her mind. You have made the choice. The path has been set. Evelyn stumbled back, her hand falling from the Nexus. She gasped, her heart racing as the voice continued, its tone now different, harsher, colder. The destruction of humanity was not an accident. It was a choice, a decision made by those who thought they could control time itself. But they were wrong. Time does not bend to the will of man. It twists, it rebels. And now the world is fractured, dying. But you can restore it. You can repair what was broken. The machines around her remained still, their eyes glowing brighter, their presence overwhelming in the vastness of the chamber. Evelyn's breath was ragged as she tried to process the weight of the voice's words. Her thoughts were a jumble, but one thing was clear. The choice was no longer in her hands. She had touched the Nexus. The path was set. She felt a surge of panic rising in her chest. Restore humanity? Could she really do that? Could anyone? She was just one person, a survivor in a world that had long since fallen silent. The machine said it was her choice, but what if the cost was too much? What if she wasn't strong enough to pay it? The price of rebirth is not one you can escape, the voice said, its words penetrating her mind like an unshakable truth. You will give all that you are. All that remains of you will be bound to the world you restore. Your body, your mind, your essence, they will be intertwined with the fate of the earth itself. You will become part of the world's new beginning, its foundation. There is no going back. Evelyn's legs buckled, and she fell to her knees, her hands shaking as she gripped the cold floor beneath her. No going back. She couldn't breathe. The weight of the decision was suffocating. pressing in on her from every side. Her thoughts spun, each one colliding with the next in a chaotic blur. The machines did not speak. They simply watched her, their glowing eyes unblinking, their presence unyielding. They were waiting for her answer. Tears filled her eyes, blurring her vision. She wiped them away angrily, as if the act could wipe away the fear, the uncertainty, the overwhelming weight of what was happening. But it couldn't. She wanted to scream, to demand to know more, but the voice in her mind would not let her. The choice has been made. Her fingers curled into fists as she forced herself to stand. Evelyn looked at the Nexus once more. Its surface shimmered, almost as though it were alive, waiting for her to take the final step. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want to be the one to carry the burden of rebuilding the world, to sacrifice herself for something that might fail. She had no guarantee of success, but she also had no guarantee of survival without it. The world outside was broken. Humanity was gone, and she was the last. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn finally spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. I will do it, she said, the words escaping her lips like a prayer. I will restore it. There was a long silence. The machines did not move, but the air around her seemed to hum with a renewed intensity, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The Nexus flared brighter, and for a moment, everything went white. When the light faded and her vision cleared, Evelyn was no longer in the cavern. She stood, somehow, back outside. The machines were gone, and the ground beneath her was smooth, almost pristine. The landscape around her was changing, shifting, renewing itself. But she wasn't alone anymore. Figures began to emerge from the distance, slowly, as if stepping from the very fabric of the world itself. People, humans. Her heart skipped a beat. Had she succeeded? Had she truly restored humanity? As the figures drew closer, Evelyn's breath caught. There was something wrong, something unfamiliar about them. Their faces were blank, empty, as if they were mere shadows of the people they were supposed to be. Something was off, and in that moment, Evelyn realized she had paid the price, but the true cost was yet to be revealed. The world was beginning again, but was it truly a new beginning? Or was it just the beginning of something far worse? Evelyn took a hesitant step forward, uncertainty filling her heart. Whatever the future held, one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. Evelyn's feet seemed to move on their own, each step bringing her closer to the figures that were slowly materializing in the distance. She was filled with a mixture of hope and dread, her heart pounding in her chest. Could it be? Could she have truly restored humanity? Was this the rebirth she had sacrificed so much for? As the figures drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. They were human, yes, but there was something wrong. Their faces were blank. Their expressions were vacant, as though their minds had been wiped clean. They moved in a synchronized, almost mechanical way, their bodies stiff and unyielding, as if they were merely puppets on invisible strings. A cold shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. This wasn't right. This wasn't humanity as she had known it. She stopped in her tracks, watching them as they continued to approach, their eyes dull and lifeless, their movements fluid but devoid of purpose. They didn't speak. They didn't acknowledge her presence. They simply walked toward her, as if they were being drawn to something, or perhaps someone, but there was no recognition in their gaze. Evelyn's breath became shallow. This is not what I wanted. The machines. The voice of the Nexus had promised her that humanity could be restored, but not like this. Not with these soulless beings. She had imagined a world of hope, of rebirth, a chance to rebuild what was lost. But now, standing before her were the shadows of people. Humans who looked like they were once alive but were now little more than empty vessels. One of the figures stopped directly in front of her. Evelyn could barely make out its features. It looked like a woman, maybe once full of life, but now her face was nothing more than a hollow mask. The woman's eyes locked onto Evelyn's, but there was no recognition there, no spark of awareness. She was vacant. Evelyn's chest tightened with the horror of it all. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice breaking as she spoke. But there was no response, no answer. The woman stood there, staring at her, as if waiting for something. And still, nothing. The silence stretched on, suffocating, oppressive. Evelyn reached out tentatively, her hand shaking as she hovered just above the woman's arm. The figure didn't flinch, didn't react at all. "Please," Evelyn whispered, her voice nearly a plea. "What happened to you?" There was a faint flicker in the woman's eyes, but it was quickly gone, like the briefest spark of something forgotten. And then, just as quickly, it was replaced by the same empty, hollow gaze. Evelyn staggered back, her breath coming faster now. This wasn't humanity. This wasn't life. She had restored the earth, yes, but at what cost? The Nexus had promised rebirth, but this was far from what she had hoped for. A chill ran through her. Had I made a mistake? Behind her, another figure appeared. A man this time, his face just as blank as the others. His eyes were glazed over, and his lips barely moved as he spoke, his voice soft, almost mechanical. "You are the one who restored us," he said, his tone flat and emotionless. "We are here because of you." Evelyn's heart twisted in her chest. He was speaking to her, yes, but there was no life in his words. No emotion, no spark of humanity. Just the cold, hollow repetition of a phrase that should have meant something, but now only served as a reminder of how far humanity had fallen. I didn't mean for this," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I wanted to save you. To bring you back." The man blinked, his head tilting slightly as though processing the words, but there was no understanding in his eyes. Only an empty stare. "Save us?" he asked, his voice devoid of inflection. "We are saved." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Was this salvation? Was this what the Nexus had meant by rebirth? A world populated by empty shells, devoid of the essence that made them human? Evelyn's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, her hands gripping her head in anguish. She had sacrificed everything to restore humanity, to bring back what was lost, and now it felt like she had unleashed a nightmare. There was no joy in these people's eyes, no warmth, no love. They were simply there, existing, but not living. Is this all there is?" she whispered, her voice cracking with despair. "Is this what I've done? Have I failed?" For the first time, a flicker of movement passed through the crowd of figures. One of them, an older man, stepped forward. His face was lined with age, but it was more than that. There was something different about him. His eyes, though still vacant, held a trace of something deeper, something almost familiar. "You are the one," the man said, his voice quieter than the others, but still with a note of recognition. "You were meant to bring us back." Evelyn looked up at him, her breath shaky. I didn't mean this. This isn't what I wanted. I wanted to restore humanity, real humanity. I wanted life." The man's gaze softened, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw something almost like sorrow in his eyes. But then it was gone. "There is no returning," the man said, his voice tinged with a faint sadness. "You restored us, yes, but not in the way you thought. You brought us back to a world that has already been broken. A world that no longer knows how to live." Her heart sank even further. "So it's true. There's no going back." A strange, bitter laugh escaped her lips. I didn't just fail. I destroyed them." "No," the man said softly. "You gave us life, but we are not what we once were. Not anymore. You may have restored us, but what you did not understand is that we are not the same people. Not anymore." Evelyn's world felt like it was shattering around her. She had restored humanity, but it was a hollow, empty version of it. The people who walked before her were not the people she had known. They were the echoes of humanity, their bodies intact, but their souls gone. The realization hit her like a crushing weight. In her attempt to undo the past, she had created something far worse. Something that couldn't live in the way it was meant to. As the crowd of figures silently gathered around her, Evelyn stood, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what she had done. And now, She was left with only one question. What happens when you bring something back, but it's never truly alive? The answer, she realized, was something she was not yet ready to face. Evelyn stood in the midst of the motionless crowd, her mind racing. Her body felt heavy, as if she were sinking deeper into the ground with each passing second. The people around her, the empty vessels of what was once humanity, shifted in unison, their movements robotic, devoid of any individual thought or will. She could feel their presence, but there was no connection, no acknowledgement of her existence. They were there, but they were not truly here. As the weight of her failure pressed down on her chest, Evelyn's gaze flicked to the man who had spoken to her earlier, the one who had shown the briefest flicker of something that resembled understanding. He stood apart from the others, his face as blank as the rest, but there was something in his posture that made him seem different. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had gone wrong. With a deep breath, she made her way toward him, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The crowd parted, seemingly without thought, creating a path for her. She felt the eyes of the empty figures follow her, but there was no emotion behind their gaze, only the empty hum of their collective existence. When she reached the man, he turned his head slightly toward her, as if sensing her presence. She could see that his eyes were darker than the others, more worn, more tired, as though he had carried something with him for a long time. "You," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. You spoke differently. You said we weren't the same anymore. What does that mean? What did I do?" The man stared at her for a long moment, his lips parting as if to speak, but he seemed to hesitate, as though weighing something heavy in his mind. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but filled with a quiet sorrow. "You did not bring us back," he said, his words deliberate. "You restored us, yes, but what you did not understand is that we were never meant to return. We were a consequence, a creation, an end." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had known something was wrong, but hearing it put into words was like a knife twisting in her gut. "A consequence? An end? What are you talking about?" The man took a slow step toward her, his gaze unwavering. "The world did not end because of time or some natural catastrophe. It ended because of us. Humans, our ancestors, believed they could control everything, even time itself." Evelyn's breath caught. "What do you mean, control time?" He looked at her for a long moment, as if considering whether to share the truth. The silence stretched on, and for a moment, it felt like time itself was bending again, like it was about to collapse under the weight of the knowledge he was holding back. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "We built the machines, not to save ourselves, but to control the world. To manipulate the flow of time, to rewrite the past, and shape the future in our image. The Nexus, the one you activated, it was not just a machine. It was a trap." Evelyn felt a cold rush of fear. "A trap? What kind of trap?" The man's eyes darkened. "The Nexus was designed by our ancestors. Those who thought they could master the universe, who believed they could erase the consequences of their own actions. It was meant to alter reality, to reset time, to create a perfect world. But what they didn't understand was that time is not something you can control. Time is a living thing. And in trying to control it, they broke it." Evelyn's mind spun as she tried to grasp what he was saying. "But I didn't break time. I restored it. I wanted to bring back humanity. To fix everything." He shook his head slowly, as if pitying her ignorance. "No, what you did was reset a broken world. The Nexus is not a tool for salvation. It's a device for retribution. Humanity reached its peak of arrogance and pride, believing it could conquer time itself. The machines, they were the result of that ambition. The world you see around you, the people you think you have restored, they are the remnants of humanity, nothing more. The real humans were lost long before the machines rose." Evelyn staggered back, her head spinning. No, that can't be true. I didn't bring back the wrong people. I didn't." The man's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something real in his gaze. something that was almost human. You brought back what remained, but not the humanity you knew, not the people who could love, who could dream, who could live. These are the hollow echoes, the consequence of humanity's attempt to control the universe. She sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was hearing. Her chest tightened, and a sob rose in her throat. What had she done? She had spent so long thinking she could fix everything, that by activating the Nexus, she could undo the destruction. But now she realized, what she had restored wasn't a world of hope. It wasn't a future to look forward to. It was the end of something. The man crouched beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. You have to understand, the machines didn't survive because they were built to last. They survived because they were designed to. They were never meant to save you, Evelyn. They were created to preserve the remains of humanity, to ensure the cycle of hubris and downfall would continue. You can't save a world that has already broken beyond repair. Evelyn's eyes blurred with tears as she gazed up at him. Then what is left? What happens now? The man's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, she could almost see a glimmer of the humanity she had hoped for. The only thing left now is to understand. The machines are here, yes, but they are not your salvation. They are your reflection. They are a warning. A reminder that once you tamper with the flow of time, once you try to control the forces beyond your comprehension, the consequences are irreversible. Evelyn's mind reeled. This was never about saving humanity. The machines, the Nexus, the people she thought she had restored, they were not what she had hoped for. They were the remnants, the broken pieces of a failed experiment. A warning. She could feel the weight of everything she had done pressing down on her, suffocating her. She had tried to fix it, tried to undo the irreversible. But in doing so, she had only repeated the mistake of the people who came before her. The world she had tried to restore was already gone. It had been destroyed, not by catastrophe or time, but by the arrogance of those who thought they could control the impossible. And now, she was left with the consequences. As she looked around at the blank faces of the people who had once been human, she realized that there was no going back. The choice had already been made. The world had already moved on. All that remained was the haunting echo of a time when humanity believed it could conquer the universe. Evelyn closed her eyes, her heart heavy with the truth she could no longer escape. The world she had known was gone, and in its place stood only the ruins of what humanity had once been. And there, in the quiet aftermath, she realized that she had become a part of that cycle, a cycle that would never truly end. And there was nothing left to do but wait. Evelyn stood at the center of the silent, shifting world, the weight of the truth crushing her like a tidal wave. She had thought she could rebuild, restore, fix the broken pieces of humanity. But now, surrounded by these hollow echoes, she understood that there was no fixing it, not in the way she had imagined. The world was not just ruined, it had been irrevocably altered by the actions of those who came before her. Humanity, in its arrogance, had tried to control the universe itself. And in their hubris, they had destroyed the very essence of what made life worth living. Now, all that remained was this fractured, lifeless imitation of what once was. The machines, the people, everything that had followed her touch of the Nexus, was part of a cycle that had already broken, a loop that no one, not even she, could escape. The destruction of humanity had not been an accident. It had been a consequence of a deeper error, one that stretched beyond time, beyond human understanding. The Nexus was never a tool for salvation. It was a mechanism for resetting a broken world, ensuring that the consequences of their actions would continue to echo through the ages. But even in this dark realization, something stirred within Evelyn, a sense of purpose, or perhaps a fleeting spark of defiance. The knowledge that she could not undo what had been done weighed heavily on her, but there was still something she could do. She could end this cycle. She could learn from it. Her eyes scanned the crowd of figures, silent, vacant, unaware. She could see the faintest flickers of the humanity they once held, but they were buried beneath layers of oblivion. The machines, too, stood still, waiting, patient in their eternal vigil. The sense of a looming presence, an almost infinite patience, pressed against her consciousness. One figure caught her eye. The man who had spoken to her before, the one who had given her the truth she hadn't wanted to hear. He stood slightly apart from the others, though still as expressionless and vacant as the rest. His figure, worn and tired, seemed to radiate an energy that was different from the rest. There was still something human about him, something real. Evelyn walked toward him once again, this time without hesitation. She had no illusions now. She wasn't seeking redemption. She wasn't looking for answers anymore. She was searching for something else, something deeper. Perhaps a way to end it, to stop the cycle. When she reached him, he turned his head slowly to meet her gaze. His eyes were still dark, shadowed by centuries of wear, but they held a quiet understanding. "You knew the truth," Evelyn said, her voice steady now. "But you didn't tell me everything. You didn't tell me what I could do." The man blinked slowly, a faint sadness in his expression. "What you can do, Evelyn, is stop. Stop trying to fix a world that cannot be fixed. You are not the last one who will try. The Nexus will continue to call to others, to anyone who believes they can undo the mistakes of the past. But that path only leads to more ruin." Evelyn stood silently, absorbing his words. The weight of them pressed on her chest like a final, unavoidable truth. She had thought the Nexus had been her only hope, her chance to restore life, to bring meaning to the endless ruins of the earth. But now, she saw that it was only part of a much larger design. A trap, a prison of time and consequence, that no one could escape. "Then what can I do?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I can't fix it, if I can't save them, then what's left for me?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out across the ruined landscape, his gaze distant, lost in the expanse of the world that had once been. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice soft but resolute. "You can choose to walk away from the Nexus. You can choose to leave this place, to step beyond its reach. The world you tried to restore is gone. But there is still the possibility of a new beginning. It's just not the one you imagined." Evelyn blinked, a spark of curiosity igniting within her. A new beginning? But how? He turned back to her, his expression more earnest than before. "The Earth is not gone, not entirely. The machines, the people, they are not the end. They are part of something else. Something waiting, but only if you can see it beyond the remnants of what humanity was." Evelyn's heart began to race as she realized what he meant. The machines, the Nexus, everything that had seemed like a curse, a trap, was also a foundation. A foundation for something that hadn't yet emerged. Something beyond the broken echoes of the past. But it would take more than just walking away. It would take understanding that the world she had known, humanity itself, was gone. What came next was different. It was a new cycle, one that had to be embraced, not as a continuation of what had been, but as something else entirely. "Do you mean to rebuild?" Evelyn asked, her voice filled with tentative hope. He nodded. "Not rebuild in the way you think. To rebuild means to create anew. It means understanding that what was lost cannot be recovered. But what is left, what the machines were meant to protect, is a new opportunity. One that goes beyond humanity's limitations, beyond the cycle of destruction and rebirth. But it will require sacrifice. It will require letting go of the past entirely." Evelyn felt a strange calm settle over her as she listened. The weight of the last few days, the horror of the failed restoration, the terror of seeing the broken remnants of humanity, began to lift. It was still a world of uncertainty, but for the first time, she felt that there was a way forward. "I've lost everything," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can still choose something new." The man's gaze softened, a glimmer of humanity returning to his eyes. "Yes, you can choose to leave this place behind, to walk into the unknown. There is a world here, a future. It's just not the one you expected. And it's waiting for those who are willing to see it." Evelyn took a deep breath, her eyes lifting toward the horizon. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she didn't feel completely alone. She could sense the possibility, the hope that had been buried under the weight of the past. It wasn't a salvation she had hoped for, but it was something else, something new. She looked back at the man, her eyes steady. "Then I will walk away," she said. "I will leave this broken world behind." The man nodded once, his expression solemn. "Then go. The world waits for those who are willing to let go." Evelyn turned away, her steps slow but sure. Behind her, the hollow figures remained, frozen in their endless loop. But ahead of her, beyond the desolate ruins and the empty machines, was the promise of something else. A new beginning, a world built on understanding, on acceptance, and on the chance to build something that had never been before. And so, Evelyn walked, not toward the past, but toward a future she couldn't yet see, a future she was ready to discover, one step at a time. And as she walked, the world around her began to shift. Not with the restoration of the old, but with the creation of the new. The end had come, and yet, in the distance, the beginning had already begun.